Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 21 of Optimal Living Advice, the podcast where we take any questions you might have about the many struggles of life and we get them answered for you here on the show. I am your host, certified life coach, Greg Audino, and in today's episode, we have anxiety on the slab. Anxiety sure is rising and rising these days. Or is it? In this episode, we'll look a bit more into anxiety and how we can leverage it in times when there is seemingly no hope. Let's check it out. What does an anxiety-free day feel like? I've been going through a major anxiety pang for the last 2 months. Good use of pang, by the way. To the extent I even stopped listening to my podcasts, my Calm app meditations, everyone around me made no sense, etc. My counselor, my family, my husband, everyone is telling me that it will get better. But better isn't good enough for me. And guess what? That makes me anxious too. It's been so long that I feel like I've forgotten what an anxiety-free day looks like. Well, I'll tell you what an anxiety-free day feels like. It feels like fiction. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, even though that's sort of become a regular thing here on the show, but an anxiety-free day does not exist. For those of you who didn't catch episode 7 about overcoming fear, a core concept we went over is the fact that fear and anxiety are massive parts of who we are. They look out for us. They help us on a moment-by-moment basis. We all have a lot more anxiety than we think we do. I'm sorry if that's not something you want to hear. Every single choice we make, every choice, is a means of combating the anxiety we have towards the opposite. Eating is done to combat the anxiety we have of going without food. Walking is done to combat the anxiety we have of staying where we are. The anxiety-ridden computing our brains do to avoid situations we feel are undesirable is an ongoing and endless process. Anxiety has objectively helped all of us infinitely more than harmed us, and it's really worth recognizing that. So, what's important from the get-go is to befriend this process and forgive it if it ever works in a way that we might not like it to. Rest assured, however, if it's working in a way we don't want it to, it's because it's feeding off of a memory stored in your brain that you might have even forgotten about. It's recognizing threat and trying to protect you from it. So what you're looking to do if you want to get out of this bout of especially strong anxiety is to both respect and understand this process that your brain is going through. This is how you can work towards acquiring a day that is not free of anxiety, but a day in which there is less undesirable anxiety, and therefore it's not overriding you or you're not perceiving it. Let's talk about how to break this cycle. I want to lay out some tips for you, some food for thought. I'll even break them down into numbers, mainly so I don't have to think of silky smooth transitions between each one. Number 1, you talk about nothing around you making sense. Let it make no sense. This kind of phrase can and probably will happen to anyone. It's part of life. It's one of life's many ups and downs. I know that after 2 months, it probably feels as though there's no climbing out, but there is. What they don't tell you is that the climbing out is tricky because you're stuck in quicksand. You're not stuck in a well. The more you resist, the harder it's going to be. This goes back to what I was saying about respecting your brain's process and seeking to understand it rather than trying to force it into something new. Allow this time. Learn from this time. It will get better. Your counselor, your family, and your husband are absolutely right. And then it might get bad again. Then good after that, and so on. That's how life works. But if we're talking about getting out of this current spell, that process is only going to be prolonged the more you insist that better isn't good enough for you. When you insist on that, as you said, you're buying into the idea that you aren't good enough in the first place, that you, as you are, can't do this and need something more. That's the belief that makes a difference between getting out of this thing sooner versus later. Okay, now, number 2, coming at you. Ask yourself what might have transpired 2 months ago when this started, or what other things might have culminated and caused you to have a breaking point around this time. See if you can manage to find a trigger that set this thing off and caused you to spiral down this far. If you can manage to lock in on 1 or 2 events that might be responsible for this, ask yourself powerful questions about them. Now, the big dog question to start with would probably be, What did I buy into about this event that wasn't true? A question like this gives you the opportunity to get realistic about what the simple truth is about this event and how that truth is quite possibly very different than what you've told yourself about it up to this point. You then might ask yourself if these anxieties are really just you acting out against something, or if there might be a healthier way to approach this, or maybe if there's something or someone you need to get closure with. Identifying the trigger, whether or not you had a balanced reaction to it, and if not, how to acquire a balanced reaction, is of really great assistance. Now, number 3, last one on the ledger. Jump right back into those actions you've been neglecting, or new actions. It's time to stop waiting for motivation before acting on something, because that's yet another way of looking for a boost from somewhere else and reiterating to yourself that you aren't enough, or you don't have enough right now to get to a healthier place. Any action right now will be useful, even if it's action you find yourself unenthused by. You can ask and examine why you're unenthused by it whilst you're doing it. I think whilst is the right word there, while or whilst. Action is so important because it forces your mind to change and have new experiences to work off of, thereby creating new thinking patterns. The most driven action you can take, however, would be to really decide on the goal you're trying to accomplish, if there's something your anxiety is holding you back from specifically. Decide what that goal is that combats your anxiety, break it into small chunks, and get to work on it. Okay, so these 3 approaches in tandem will put you back into the driver's seat by helping you respond actively rather than passively to your anxiety. Though unwanted anxiety is due to return at any time, the more you can stay on top of it in ways like these, the more it's apt to staying in check and helping you only in the most practical ways. And there we are, friends. Of course, everyone's anxiety is different, but one of the things we try to do here on the show is provide universally applicable themes to the answering of each question. And hopefully we did that for you today because, as we mentioned at the top of the show, anxiety is something that has absolutely been being paid more attention to recently. So if you have one of your own questions about something you're struggling with that you'd like answered on the show, you can email that question to us at advice@oldpodcast.com. That's advice@oldpodcast.com. We'd love to do what we can for you, as you know, so please don't be shy and keep the great questions rolling in. We're sending a free book to those who send questions in, a little extra something to be excited about. I also invite you to check out my other material at gregaudino.com or follow me on Instagram at simplygregals if you love the podcast and want more access to more material that can help you out. All right? Can't wait to break down another one for you next time, and we hope you'll check in for that one. Until then, everyone, take care.